ZX was created because at ABI, if the baby is not born with 16 years old, it doesn't get born. You know what I mean? There's no space for babies to, to mature. And the core was kind of, always trying to be more efficient and things like that. So ZX was actually created exactly for that. Okay, let's have some baby and let's wait until this babies are 16. Hopefully when they are 16, then the core is very well equipped. So today, a lot of the businesses of the X already are folded into the core business. And because of their size and their contribution to the core business, they are very well taken care of. Some of the capabilities that are a little different, e-commerce and technology, a very different capability from the core business. Some of those capabilities were transferred together, with the business, but from an operating process standpoint, now it fits the mold. Now you can work on 1-year plans. Now you can work with, procurement at scale. Now you can work with a lot of process of the core. When you are, a baby, if you work with annual business cycles and things like that, you don't survive.
Pedro, thank you so much for being here. We're really looking forward to jumping into the conversation. So you and I met in 2017. It's been a while now. And that was a couple of years after you had started ZX Ventures at AB InBev. And that was the Disruptive Growth Organization, which was an awesome name. And Highline Beta and ZX Ventures, we worked on a number of projects together. And for me personally, was an amazing experience. There's two things I sort of wanted to highlight right away in the intro. One of my biggest aha moments that I had was the focus on underutilized assets that AB InBev had. This idea of we have these things that we can leverage into creating new value for consumers, for new types of customers, create new businesses like Spent Grain. And the businesses that were created like Evergrain and BioBrew, just that blew my mind because it's just not a way I had ever thought before. And then the other thing I think is super interesting, and I know we'll get into this, is really about how you were doing everything. You were building ventures internally, you were investing like a corporate venture capital arm, and you were also acquiring businesses. To me, doing all three at the same time, very ambitious and really something I hope we can dig into. I know you left AB InBev a few years ago. You're now the founder of a startup, and I'm sure we'll talk about that as well. But to me, the story of ZX Ventures and AB InBev is just an incredible one. And I know a lot of people are interested in how this company took this ambitious mission forward. So with that, I'm going to dive in with my first question. Why back in 2015 or thereabouts when this all started, why did you and AB InBev decide to start this disruptive growth organization? What was the reason behind that?
So Ben, Marcus, thanks a lot for the invite. Good friends for some time. Great to be here. Ben, actually, to rewind a little bit, the story of ABI, the creation of ABI, goes back to 2000 and something, where InBev in Belgium and Ambev in Brazil start acquiring consolidating markets, right? So the whole history of growth of the company was a history of basically acquisition, M&A, and then cost management, and that created like an immense value until 2004 when InBev and Ambev got together. And basically from there was acquisition of Modelo in Mexico and House of Busch and then Sam Miller, whatever. So it has always been a history of M&A. But at some point in time, we knew that M&A has a limit. There's so much you can do in M&A, and even when you start doing M&As that are big and you're huge, the synergies are somewhat not that relevant for your value creation. So the board has been thinking for a while, since 2010 or so, how can we speed up organic growth and innovation in particular? But that was faced with a massive challenge, which is, big companies, sometimes they have like a product in a business that works very well, very profitable, very efficient, and it's very, very hard to divert focus, resources, people to innovation. Innovation is a completely different animal, requires a different skill set, takes a long time, it costs money, sometimes less profitable than the core business. So even if the intention is there, sometimes the way to operate on a day-to-day kind of doesn't work. And I was very lucky because ABI, it's a public traded company, but uh, it's actually controlled by families, right? We have, the Grupo Modelo, and we have InBev, and we have the Ambev, uh, original shareholders. So, it's a public traded company, but we have shareholders that have a very long view, and they think very long term. So actually, that started from the board. The board had a discussion back in 2014, and they said, "Look, we think the company is on the right mindset. Everybody wants to accelerate organic growth. We need to be more innovative." At the time, we kind of start suffering a little bit in the US with craft beers. We saw a lot of e-commerce booming in other industries, not yet in beer, but we saw that we were a little bit behind as an industry. So there were some signs that we are kind of behind in innovation. And the board said, "Look, we like the mindset. I think we all realize we're a little behind. We know that people want to make a difference. The setup just isn't right." And the board said, "Look, we got to go there and we got to create something new." The board, together with Brito at the time, which was the CEO. And to be honest, I think that was fundamental, that this idea and this initiative came from the board. Sometimes, during my years at ZX, we had a lot of people from other companies that were starting their own innovation groups or corporate venture capital. And that came as a management initiative with some skepticism from the board. And I was really blunt with people. I said, "Guys, look, it's very difficult if it comes from the board. It's starting from management, trying to convince the board. Look, I don't envy your position, because it's very, very difficult." So that's kind of where it started. I was VP of marketing in Latin America at the time. I was working full on the core business. I had always worked in the core. But I think, Brito and the core thought that I had kind of this more maverick personality. I was always trying new things, and I was always bringing new things. In Latin America, we started investing in craft beers. We had already launched some e-commerce initiatives. So they said, "Look, let's try to take some people and put them really apart, different things, full autonomy, separate P&L, and let's see if it works," right? It's really the skunk works, right? The Lockheed Martin case, where we were really the people with a pirate flag. So that's how it started. When Brito invited me, at first I said no. I said, "Brito, look,"
Really?
yeah, there were two reasons.
I didn't know that.
There,
I didn't realize that
yeah,
either. No.
Interesting.
everybody thought I was very stupid, because that was kind of a C-level role reporting directly to the CEO, and I was VP of marketing Latin America. But there were basically two reasons. One reason was that I really believe at the time that we should have more people with maverick personalities in leadership positions in the company, so that the company could become more innovative and more maverick from the core. So I was kind of skeptical, about this model of running innovation from the outside. And the second one, to be honest, that I was living my dream job. For years I had a dream of, becoming the VP of marketing in Latin America. But he convinced me, and he said, "Look, you have full autonomy over the mandate. You know what the mandate is. The mandate is we are behind innovation. We got to be ahead of innovation. But I don't know what we're gonna do. I don't know who you're gonna bring. I don't know how compensation system is gonna work. I mean, this is all for you and the team to decide. But there's one thing that I wanted you to consider, which is to have this area called Disruptive Growth Group."
Yeah, no, I remember vividly kind of communicating brew the future and kind of looking 5, 10 years out, and became a bit of a rallying cry. And I'm thinking about even that the context of the time is quite amazing, right? You talked about the board, 2010, 2015, I think you were kind of launched or really building kind of the operating model. Maybe tell us a bit more about just that time of how, you got that kind of slogan of brew the future and other, things that you thought really was able to rally kind of the organization behind this initiative.
Yeah. So we, when we started in 2015, we defined really the scope and the mandate, and the mandate was really to create the future for ABI. When you have a business of our side that is so profitable, I mean, 90% of the people, they are really thinking, about the next year, even about the next 3 years. And it's very hard to put resources and focus to think about the next 5 to 10 years, right? So we were the group that was kind of building optionality and trying to open new avenues of growth. So hopefully, by the time we got 5, 10 years down the road, the things that we created already have enough scale so that the core can absorb it and grow it. And that was really the brew of the future, mindset. But at the beginning, as I was saying, this thing about disruptive growth, people thought that the disruptive growth was about the mandate to do things that were disruptive in the world, but actually, it was an internal thing. Brito wanted to say, I wanted to call it disruptive growth because I want people to know that we're going to disrupt and we're going to bother our core business. And we might even cannibalize our core business. And people need to be fine with that because we're all partners and we're all thinking about the future. So that's kind of how we got going.
I have to ask this question. Chief Disruptive Growth Officer. That is such a badass corporate executive title,
I
right? How did you pull that off?
I think it's so silly. The first chance that I had, I killed the title and I killed Disruptive Growth Office and we changed to Zax Ventures. I was so embarrassed, once I went through immigration and the immigration officer started making fun of me. He said, "What's your role?" And I said, I'm Chief Disruptive Growth Officer. And he started making fun of me, saying, "Oh, Mr. Disruptive." And I was like, "Oh, look, I totally understand. I will make fun of myself. It was not my choice. But it was, yeah, that was the title."
So Ben knows this actually. One of my little things I do is when I collect business cards, typically from chief innovation officers or chief transformation officers, I take it and I scratch out the innovation word and I write growth.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I tell a story typically about you, about like you can maybe graduate to this level of boldness later on.
I actually, I said, "Look, I know that you're giving me autonomy to decide everything. You're just pushing the name, but I'm gonna actually dispute the name too." And I told Brito, why don't you call it, Chief Growth Officer? At the time, Chief Growth Officer didn't kind of exist. This came a little later, and because I said, "Look, if I just call this Chief Disruptive Growth Officer, people are gonna think that my mandate is not to grow, is to disrupt, and my mandate is to grow." And he was like, "Look, man, I'm giving you autonomy to do whatever you guys, think it's right, but the name is the name, it's Disruptive Growth." I'm like, "Okay."
So you start the disruptive growth organization. I think your point about coming from the top down, an important one. We've lived this experience, where we've been involved with companies starting venture studios or other models where they have top down support and it makes a huge difference. We've also worked the other way, management up, trying to convince people to do things. And you're right, that's really hard. But since disruptive was in the title, at least for a little bit, how did the rest of the business react to that? So I think the principle of it makes tons of sense. And Brito's like, we need to shake things up. And you said it, maybe we're going to cannibalize some things. And I know we were in meetings talking about that very thing, building, craft beer as an example, cannibalizing maybe mainstream brands. So how did the rest of the business react to that? Was there a lot of friction, a little friction, sometimes and not other times? Because you also had a blank slate and had to prove yourself.
Yeah. So there was some friction, but also that's the second thing that I was very lucky. ABI has a very, very strong partnership culture. People scream a lot for cultural values and similar cultural values, and it's a company really of partners and of owners. And a lot of people, they joined the ranks when they were 20, 22 years old, so in a way, people know each other for a long, long time. And my peers, I've known them. We have common values. We're real partners and we've been working for a long, long time. So there was a saying of everybody looked at it and says, "This makes sense. It's the best thing for the company. As partners, we know that that's the right thing to do." But the agenda in the short term conflicts, and it conflicts a lot. And there are things that are a real conflict, and there are things that are psychological conflicts, right? So let me give you some examples. There were some things that are real conflicts, like, okay, we had this mandate to produce craft beers. And we have a massive competitive advantage in craft beers because the moment we start buying bottles through our supply chain or we start producing craft beers in our breweries, they were 10 times more efficient than some of other craft brewers. So we could pass on some of the benefits to the consumer and then democratize craft beers, right? But that created a real conflict with the core business because if you put a few craft brewers in our brewery, it reduces the efficiency of the brewery, and it impacts the core business, and they see that on their P&L, right? So that's kind of despite the fact that we are aligned as a partnership in what's need to be done for the future. In the short term, I'm hurting the core business P&L, and that created some friction. I remember that there was, I had a couple of fights, right? And again, those are good fights because we said, look, we are partners, we love each other, but we have a conflicting agenda, and each one of us will have to defend your own agenda. And at the end, we're gonna have to come to a resolution. But for example, we started e-commerce business. And we knew that for the users don't want to buy ABI beer. The user want to buy beer and beverages, right? So we kind of had this consumer obsession. We're going to build a product that works for the consumer. And we offered in our e-commerce business competitive beer. Like at ABI, as a culture, like if your mother ever drinks a product that is not from ABI, you don't talk to your mother anymore. That's the kind of that.
I lived it.
Yeah.
I lived it once, Pedro. I was talking to somebody on your team. I won't name the person's name. It doesn't matter. And I can't remember if I was doing a video call or something, or there was a picture and there was another beer in my fridge. Somebody saw a different beer in my fridge, and I mean, obviously we were joking about it, but I had that like, you can't be drinking that anymore. It's like, okay, get rid of that. Take that out of the fridge.
No, it's exactly that, and that's like this culture of ownership. It's really unique, right? If you ever own business and like your mom is kind of strengthening your competitor, like that doesn't make any sense. So this like, and then all of a sudden, we create a group and we create an e-commerce business that is actually selling and profiting from competitive beers. So it creates a real conflict, in the short term. But again, that's a second point that I mentioned because in a lot of companies, the companies that don't have this partnership and this long-term mindset, this short-term agenda conflicts usually kills the innovation arm. Because at the end so I saw some companies, there were basically two models, right? One model is where this innovation arm was kind of a capability role, and they were kind of trying to convince the core to give resources, gave classes of leading innovation and whatever. And there was a model which is, no, okay, this innovation thing is a P&L, it's a business, and they have autonomy and different compensation, whatever. Like it's very hard if everything in the P&L is everything is under one person. You can go there and you can influence and convince whatever, but at the end, the person has one P&L. It's like, why am I going to produce craft beers when I can produce only, core big volume beers? So
It's a good argument, if you will, for separating the function out, right? And saying we got to go do this, call it whatever we want, but we're going to go do this on the outside, separate P&L, managed independently, because we know there's the potential for conflict over time, particularly in those early stages as people are adapting. At the same time, there were opportunities to leverage the resources from inside the core as well, right? So like it's such an interesting dynamic of we're on the outside doing cool things, but we kind of need you to play along to help us with scale, or again, underutilized assets or other things that you would be leveraging from the core all the time.
100%.
Yeah, when we compare a lot of other corporate environments, I think you said it really well with respect to the culture of partnership, ownership as being such a bedrock, a foundation. And even these conflicts, I'm curious, upon reflection, were there any really positive cultural mutations because of the legacy of what you did, right? Because that conflict can spawn, I think, new forms of growth or new elements of just reinforcing that kind of core foundation you had.
100%. I have until this day, I have a lot of people because first, right? We kind of the way we structure our teams, we had some people from ABI coming, especially because culture is so important, right? And I can talk a little bit about culture later, but like we don't believe the innovation arm should have a different culture from the the core business, and kind of we have a very specific definition of culture. So it's very important for you from the get-go to get the culture right, to have some people from the core business. And we brought a lot of entrepreneurs from the outside that had different points of view and different ways of working, right? After 5 years, we started swapping people and we started bringing more people because we kind of set up we did our initial setup. Then we said no more people from the core for 5 years. And then after 5 years, we said now some entrepreneurs that are originally from ZX are going to go into the core business, and some people from the core are going to start going to ZX. And it's amazing, to this day, people from the core that went to ZX and went back to the core said like it completely changed my mindset and my life and things like that. And the other way around, so people that were entrepreneurs and they went to the core business, they said, wow, I learned things that I never thought, about. And I get a lot of, I have people from other companies that ended up hiring people that left ZX. And one thing that they all say is that it's amazing how people at ZX, they understand the importance and they understand the benefits of processes of a big organization while understanding the benefits of running lean and knowing when to apply one and when to apply the other, so it's kind of, I really think it's a benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I still, I mean, there's people I still speak to that aren't in ZX anymore from those days that we were working with. Tom Allison, I don't know if you remember Etkin, Etkin, but like he went off eventually and started his own company. And every time I catch up with him every couple of months, it's still like the what he learned and the experiences he had in ZX are still infused in what he's doing. Entrepreneurial, but efficient. Like the operational efficiency focus from the core with the notion of, but I got to try new things. I've got to, he's restaurants. It's Haven Hot Chicken, right? So it's like a lot of chicken businesses. How do I compete? How do I differentiate? How am I operationally efficient? And every time I talk to him, it's like ZX comes right through. It's just sort of amazing, genuinely the impact it had, and the way you thought about culture and teams was cool, because a lot of people, again, they leave, but they go on and do amazing things after as well.
Yeah, such an incredible, I think, lens that we've seen kind of the alumni have in some respects, regardless if they're still in the organization or have kind of gone beyond.
Yeah, it's at the beginning, kind of Six Sigma efficiency and cost management, whatever, was one religion, and lean and agile and whatever was the other religion, and people had like beliefs, and say, look, you can do everything with lean or you can do everything with Six Sigma. They were kind of, and people learned over time that these are two things that are very useful, and you can bring the best of both, and you have to understand when to use one and when to use the other. We have some stories that are very funny about that. So we when we started ZX, we had kind of we work office, and we were there for like 2 or 3 months, and there was no printer. And I was like, guys, I mean, we don't have a printer. We need a printer. These days nobody uses a printer anymore. At that time, 2015, people still use printers. And then they said, oh yeah, but we're still buying through ABI supply, and we buy printers every 6 months. So we have to wait another 4 months to buy a printer. And I was like, guys, it doesn't make any sense, So here's my personal card, credit card, go to whatever, somewhere and buy a printer, So they went there with my credit card, bought the printer, came back with the printer, and everybody was excited. And then 2 days later, I was trying to print something and there was no printer. And I'm like, guys, I mean, what happened? They said, look, we found out ABI has a global agreement with Xerox. So no printer, there's not from Xerox, bought through ABI supply chain can get connected to the network. So we can connect the printer that we bought. And so people were complaining about this. And I said, guys, look, for ABI, this makes a lot of sense. ABI buys 700 printers, 800 printers every 6 months. We probably over the last 10 years saved millions and millions and millions of dollars into printers. And I would do exactly the same thing. It's just that when you have a group of 20 people and you need one printer and you're going to save 20% on one printer, that doesn't make any sense because the productivity that you lose doesn't compensate for the $20 that you're going to save, right? But you need to understand. So the same thing happened, like the same case happened 10,000 times. We had an entrepreneur once that just went to, he wanted to, like, the brewery was running out of capacity. And the entrepreneur that we acquired his company, and so he was working for us, had an earn-out, whatever. He just went into like into a fair, a market of equipment and he was running out of capacity. He just took his credit card and he bought like a tank, like, I don't know, $10 million or something like that. And he came back and he said, yeah, we're running out of capacity. I bought a new tank. I said, what do you mean you bought a new tank? Yeah, I bought a new tank. I like, how did you buy a new tank? No, I just expensed it. And I'm like, you cannot expense a tank. And I said, dude, he said, no, through ABI, this will take a year. And I'm going to run out of capacity before 1 year. So I had to explain to him, dude, like, if you're buying one tank, that makes sense. If the whole company has a credit card and any brewery can buy a tank with a credit card, this company goes under. So again, it's just understanding context.
Yeah, I mean, Ben and I have seen that, the personal credit card being like the procurement hack, to get some things done during these sprints. But that's part of the lore, I guess, right? Being a maverick. I mean, you'll be able to say, okay, here we go, get the printer.
Yeah, but that then we go back to the partnership and ownership point. So at the time, my partner in supply, uh, very, very good guy, very understanding. And then we just agreed, said, look, any purchase below $2 million doesn't go through ABI supply, and we can buy directly and we can do it or whatever. And it was kind of, that's an example of a partnership. Of course, every time there was a new person in procurement in a zone, the first thing the person did was like, oh, this X purchase now got to go to supply. Then we had to kind of go back. But those are a little bit of the pains.
I'd love, Pedro, to dig in a little bit on the operating model. You guys had one, really the methodology of how did you go about validating opportunities? You mentioned lean, agile methodologies. How did you go about really validating the rigor or not that went into validating things? And then the other part of that question for me that I think is interesting is, how did you figure out or manage expectations around scale? Because, of course, any business that starts in a studio or a structure like ZX is tiny relative to the size, of course, of the corporate, right? AB InBev is a multi-billion-dollar business. ZX was producing, when they come out of ZX, smaller businesses. So I'm curious about the rigor of that methodology, but also sort of hey, we made something and it's amazing and it's tiny. And how did that work and how did the company react to that?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing that you got to do in this case is align expectations, right, and align the mandate, and what is the objective really of having a disruptive growth group, and at the time, one of the board members, he said, look, I think ABI can have or should have two roles. One role is to create the future's avenue of growth, and in a reasonable time frame, let's say 5 or 10 years, create value for the company, right? And if you guys grow and scale and you're doing the things that are growing and things like that, maybe that value creation can be meaningful. It's hard because at the time the company already had roughly like $50 billion in revenue. So even if you created $2 billion in revenue, it wouldn't be like massive, right? He said the second thing is that in a way you guys should work as a vaccine. You are the little virus, that are coming, and people in the core business, because they're going to see you guys growing and you're doing things and your things are growing and they are cool and they're the future, whatever, maybe they will start moving and they will start doing the things that you guys are doing. They will start competing with you. And that's fine too, because then the company moves in the right direction, and we kind of saw This we defined this as a mandate, right? We came to the board, in the first 2 months, and we said, look, this is our aspiration in terms of top line, because top line was a big priority, but also this aspiration in terms of value creation. And hopefully we're going to start acting away and using some processes that the core will adopt, and it will also speed up innovation in the core. Looking back, the two things happen. We have a lot of businesses that in ZX that got to like a pretty good scale, and became very meaningful businesses for some units. But also there were a lot of things that we started doing that people in the core said, "Oh no, look, ZX now is competing with me with this, and we gotta start doing this because otherwise this guy's gonna do, and they cannibalize my business." And there are businesses within the core that are massive today that we had a competing business in ZX, and the core accelerated. So that was great as well.
Yeah. That's hard to measure, I guess, from you can see it happening, but maybe hard to credit maybe is easy. Like, hey, we started this thing, you saw us doing it, you got a little nervous, so you decided to compete with us. And because of the scale you have, you were able to scale it better. But when we think about like putting points on the board, was that obvious at the time for ZX to say, obviously top line is easy to measure, but that influence may be harder to really take the credit for, get measured against?
Yeah, I had a discussion with some people, because they really said, "Oh, look, I was doing this in this market. The core was trying to block me, and now they are copying it and they are doing whatever." Then again, it's the mindset of ownership and of partnership. I said, "Look, it doesn't matter. Our role here is to make the company grow. It's not to say, look, I want ZX. If ZX successful and our core business fails, we fail. So of course, we are here to make ZX successful, but ZX it's a tool to make ABI successful. So don't worry about like scores, and who did this and who did what. I mean, this kind of discussion doesn't have a place in our company. We are all here for the same mandate, and at the end, it doesn't matter if people are doing it and we're moving in the right direction. Forget about this thing of getting accountability. People that are close, they knew who was doing a good job and who was doing the things, and who was kind of stealing ideas or not. So when you're close to your teams, you know exactly how this works. So the right people always get credit for the right things, but you don't have to to get a prize and a trophy in front of everybody because you gave an idea, and that doesn't make sense.
I think you, I mean, this is again a great example of how you were able to create that cultural foundation to be able to achieve that. In the narrative, which you did quite well, and just protecting that kind of collective win, was there any unconventional metrics that you used as well to kind of get alignment with kind of the core business? Sometimes heuristics of looking at the value creation, as you described, traditional venture metrics that maybe VCs or startups on the outside, and it's a shared win. We see a lot of that. And it's really hard to communicate. And I think you've done such a great job of examples of scaling ventures, corporate ventures. So, always curious if there's any insights there that you could share.
Yeah, so we actually I think we didn't use anything unconventional in the way to measure ZX success over the long term. I think quite the opposite. We use very standard metrics, and again, our two main KPIs for the long term of ZX were top line growth and value creation, right? The big difference is that sometimes our core business measure on those metrics on an annual basis, and we would be measuring a 5 to 10 year horizon, which makes a huge difference. At that in the first I think year or two of ZX, despite a lot of the synergies that we have with the core business, we had negative cash flow, and we kind of use a lot of money to to fund acquisitions and things like that. So that was different. Some of the things that if you're trying the core business and it doesn't work for like 3 months, you kill. At CX, we kept them for a while. I think one big example, uh, it's Zed Delivery. Zed Delivery today, I think, is the biggest beverage e-commerce in the world. Is massive, right? It's something that really big. Is a substantial part of our business in Brazil, which is a big business. And ZX, I think in the third year was doing kind of $50,000 a month in revenues. A project within the core that is $50,000 on the first month gets killed on the second month. It doesn't even get off the ground. If you don't say, look, in the first month I'm gonna have 2 or 3 million, it's very hard to get off the ground. So that's the difference. The difference that the time horizons were different, but the metrics were kind of more or less the same, I think. The caveat, right, and just to finalize that, of course, to get to that value creation, we had to invest in some very early stage, and then the metrics are completely different, right? Then it's your guys' wheelhouse, right? I mean, we learn everything from early stage metrics with you guys, and that's kind of what we get.
Yeah, like traction, early signals, like all of those, we called stickiness metrics, right? Because again, like a big company doesn't necessarily think about those metrics because, like you said, I got to get to 2 million in the first month. So it's like very binary. It either worked really well or it did not work. Whereas, I think we know early stage startups a little messier than that at the very beginning. Zay Delivery being a good example. I don't know what the growth chart looks like on Zay, but I bet it's like most startups where it's flat or a little bit growth for a while, and then there's some inflections and some things come to, like Airbnb's graph looks the same way, and then it takes off, and all of a sudden it's big, and hard to predict that over 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years.
Yeah, at ABI, we only talk about hectoliters, right? It's like 100 years, right? Like that, hectoliters, that's the metric. And when we started ZX, what we usually do is we go to 100 stores, and then we take a look at the rate of sale of the product within these 100 stores. What's the rate of repurchase, whatever. And I remember we said, look, in New York, in Manhattan, if you have over 9 cases, I'm throwing a random number. If you have like 9 cases per week of turnover, then you have a winning product. Then you're gonna have repurchase. That's the kind of the benchmark. And I remember people like, what is cases? Is that a case of 24? Is that a case of like 12? Is that a case of like 12 ounces? That's 16 ounces. So people didn't even know the metric of small scale, and of what is a case? I mean, we never talked about a case.
I mean, with the operating model's success and having venture scaling, how much of your role was also evolving at a time to kind of protect some of these ventures? Some of them didn't have, like you described, having these kind of outlier metrics. And, I think that's always a really interesting battle that people who have that kind of chief growth officer roles that we've seen over the years. I'm curious if think you reflect back on those times, where there's some good insights there.
Yeah, protect the babies, right? Like protect the kids.
No, 100%. 100%. Again, ZX was created because at ABI, if the baby is not born with 16 years old, it doesn't get born. You know what I mean? I mean, there's no space for babies to mature. And again, yes, for ABI, but not for the core, right? The core was kind of always trying to be more efficient and things like that. So ZX was actually created exactly for that. Okay, let's have some babies, and let's wait until these babies are 16. Hopefully, when they are 16, then the core is very well equipped. So today, a lot of the businesses of ZX already are folded into the core business, and because of their size and their contribution today to the core business, they are very well taken care of. Some of the capabilities that are a little different, e-commerce and technology is a very different capability from the core business. Some of those capabilities are transferred together, with the business, but from an operating process standpoint, now it fits the mold. Now you can work on 1-year plans. Now you can work with, procurement at scale. Now you can work with a lot of process at the core. When you are, a baby, if you work with annual business cycles and things like that, you don't survive.
Maybe, I know we're closing in on our time, Pedro. As you reflect back on your time with ZX, and I know it's been a few years since you were there and running it, are there things you would have done differently that you're saying, oh, we could have done this, we should have done that? I always, Not everything was a winner, of course. We know that it can never be the case when we're building new things. So, are there lessons learned there, or things you said, oh, maybe we could have tried something different?
Yeah, I think there were two things. One thing is when we started ZX, we said we gotta embrace the startup lean religion, right? And everything in lean, works, and the mindset of the entrepreneurs, we works and things like that. And in a way, we are kind of the different startup because some of the products were proven, right? Craft beer is kind of proven. We operate in multiple countries at the same time, so sometimes process is a little more important. So we embraced kind of the religion, and the credo of lean, when maybe there wasn't the the optimal model for us because we are a hybrid a hybrid business. So I hire, for example, pure entrepreneurs to manage businesses that are already at scale and global. And the entrepreneur wanted to kill himself because said, man, I cannot operate a business in 15 countries at the same time and having calls about performance every month. I want to operate a business. So that was a mistake of going extreme on lean and things like that. The second thing is that to navigate this thing about, I need the core, but I'm going to disrupt the core. We are partners, but we have conflicting agendas. It requires an immense emotional intelligence, which I do not have. So there are some fights, that I picked, to make a point, to say, look, to make clear that we have a mandate to do whatever we want. So we would do, sometimes something that the core will complain about, I could shut down day one, not to create the noise. Then I wouldn't shut down, but the next day I was calling for a favor, So yeah, I mean, the second learning for me is, like, I think, to be honest, as a company, we had the perfect setup. We had long-term shareholders. We had a partnership. It came from the board. They gave full autonomy to have separate. So to set up, it was perfect. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better setup. Even with that, there are massive conflicts on a day-to-day, and you need a lot of emotional intelligence to navigate. So that's something very important.
Yeah, I mean, Pedro, you're an amazing maverick global executive. I think your EQ is pretty high to be able to last that long and be able to kind of push forward the agenda you did. But I think also what's quite inspiring for us to see is kind of how you also have segued now to become your own founder and start your own business. And I think, I'd love to dive a bit deep into that, if the lessons you've learned, over the years of ZX and now applying to your own company.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you say once you get the startup bug, is hard, right? To get out. Yeah, so it's funny because I'm bringing things both from ABI and from the startup world, of course. One of the things that I really believe in, which is a secret formula that I saw working at ABI so well during so many years, is this triangle of dream, people, and culture, right? If you have a dream that it's big, bold, that a lot of people feel attracted by, that is ambitious enough, that is gonna attract the right people. If you have a group of extraordinary people with common values, and if you have processes and culture that are making these people flourish, I think this applies to almost any business. It doesn't matter if it's a startup, it doesn't matter if it's a big company, whatever. I really believe in this model. I've been applying this. It's kind of strange because you go to a startup and then you talk about dream people culture, which is the same thing that ABI has, but I really believe in the model. But it's a different business. We're in a business of solving a problem. I mean, my business today is focused a lot on happiness and human potential. It's, for me, it's probably the oldest and the biggest problem in the world, right? Happiness and maximizing your human potential. And there's no solution at scale, right? There's the big four, book from Scott Galloway. He says that the biggest business in the world are the biggest human needs, right? The need for consumption, Amazon, the need for knowledge, Google, whatever. The biggest need in the world is happiness, and there is no product, for happiness. Like, you cannot go somewhere and say, "Look, I have a product here that really helps me." So it's very different. I mean, we're trying to create something new. But for me, it's so interesting to see that again. You get a big dream, you end up attracting right people, you attract the right people that are extraordinary, they start coming up with great solutions. And then if you have the right process for these people to be able to flourish, the thing just goes, and I'm seeing it going. So it's amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome, Pedro. You're happy, right?
Yeah, I'm very happy. Although people, that's one of the difficulties of my business is happiness means different things for different people, and
Oh, now we're gonna get complicated. Yeah.
yeah, and being happy is not necessarily laughing all the time outside. Being happy is laughing inside in the long term.
Interesting. Interesting. But we're all happy, right? We're just going to say that for now. And I appreciate the time, Pedro. This was awesome. I know we could have kept going, digging into ZX, and the story is incredible. So thank you so much for chatting with us, and really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I really want to take the opportunity to acknowledge you guys. We didn't talk about the, Highline Beta and the work that we've done together, but this was completely, unknown territory for us. Processes and how to measure, and how to have the mindset. And you guys probably accelerated, our journey years and years and years, with all the knowledge and the partnership. So it's been a super super fruitful partnership. The business, right, that came out of the accelerator are big businesses today. We have a bunch of amazing successes. So thank you for the partnership.
I remember Zay Delivery in the very first sort of internal accelerator program we ran. A few guys from Brazil, right? And I was like, it was just awesome because there were so many cool businesses, and for me, seeing different types of businesses, models solving different problems, software, hardware, physical goods, of course, beverages, and like you guys did all of those things, and it was a fascinating experience.
Yeah, it's just sad that for me, that the thing that I'm probably the most proud of is the caliber of people that came out of that experience.
Awesome. Thanks, Pedro.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
Thank you.